Hello there, and welcome to Midnight Geography. Tonight, we'll drift into the quiet corrections of our planet's misunderstood truths. Geography is the art of knowing where we stand, yet most of us carry mental maps drawn from assumptions rather than observation. These misconceptions float through our consciousness like inherited whispers, creating a parallel Earth that exists only in collective imagination. If you enjoy these peaceful geographical explorations, consider liking and subscribing. It helps other curious minds find their way here too. But for now, let's begin. Reno, Nevada sits quietly in its high desert basin, holding a secret that confounds the mental maps we've drawn since childhood. This city of casinos and snow-capped mountains rests 86 miles west of Los Angeles, not east as our assumptions insist. The revelation feels almost impossible until you trace California's coastline with a patient finger, watching it curve dramatically eastward in its southern reaches like a great arm reaching back toward Arizona. Los Angeles has wandered so far east that it's actually escaped the expected boundaries of the West Coast, while Reno maintains its position in the rain shadow of the Sierra Nevada. This geographical truth reminds us that our sense of direction often relies more on cultural assumptions than actual compass bearings. We place cities where we think they belong in our mental landscape, creating an imaginary geography that feels more real than the actual coordinates beneath our feet. The northern edge of Brazil reaches toward the Caribbean with an ambition that defies our expectations of South American geography. This vast country's northernmost point, a windswept promontory called Monte Caburaí, lies above the entirety of every South American nation except Venezuela, French Guiana, Guyana, and Suriname. Brazil stretches so far north that its upper boundaries actually sit above the southern tips of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay. The Amazon basin has pulled Brazil northward like a great green magnet, extending the country into latitudes we typically reserve for the Caribbean nations. This unexpected reach transforms our understanding of the continent's shape, revealing South America not as a simple triangle pointing south, but as a complex form that bulges northward along its Atlantic edge. The mental map we carry, with Brazil tucked neatly in the continent's center, dissolves into something more nuanced and surprising. Maine holds a distinction that seems to defy the basic logic of American geography. From Quoddy Head, the easternmost point of the continental United States, the distance to Africa measures only 3,154 miles, specifically to El Beduza, on Morocco's Atlantic coast. This makes Maine, not Florida, with all its southeastern positioning, the closest U.S. state to the African continent. The Atlantic Ocean performs a great narrowing as you travel north, bringing continents closer in ways our flat maps fail to convey. The projection of the globe onto paper has trained us to think horizontally when we should be thinking in curves and spheres. Ships departing from Portland, Maine would reach Casablanca faster than those leaving from Miami, though everything about our intuitive geography suggests otherwise. This proximity explains the surprising similarities in ocean currents and weather patterns between Maine's rocky coast and Morocco's Atlantic shores, a connection hidden by our misunderstanding of global geometry. The Panama Canal performs a magic trick with compass directions that has confused travelers since its opening in 1914. Ships entering from the Pacific Ocean actually begin their journey further east than those entering from the Atlantic side. The canal runs northwest to southeast, not east to west, as our mental simplification insists. Panama itself curves like a sideways letter S, placing its Pacific coast not just south but also east of its Caribbean shore. A ship traveling from New York to San Francisco through the canal actually travels southeast for most of its canal transit, not west as logic would suggest. This geographical paradox exists because Panama forms a twisted bridge between continents, refusing to align with our neat cardinal directions. The engineers who built the canal worked with the land's natural orientation rather than forcing it to match our expectations, creating a waterway that flows at an angle to our assumptions. Finland floats in latitudes that most Americans cannot fathom, with its entire landmass positioned north of every point in the continental United States. Helsinki, the capital that feels so European and accessible, shares its latitude with Anchorage, Alaska, both cities perched at 60 degrees north. The entirety of Finland exists in what Americans would consider the Arctic, yet 6 million people live there in modern cities with underground shopping centers and heated sidewalks. This northern positioning explains the summer nights when darkness never fully arrives and winter days that barely distinguish themselves from night. The Gulf Stream performs its warming magic here, allowing civilization to flourish at latitudes where North America offers only tundra and spruce forests. Our mental maps place Finland vaguely over there in northern Europe, without grasping that it sits level with Hudson Bay and the Northwest Territories. Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador keeps a secret that redefines our understanding of Earth's highest places. While Everest claims the title of highest altitude above sea level, Chimborazo's summit marks the point on Earth's surface farthest from the planet's center, extending 6,800 feet further into space than Everest's peak. This happens because Earth is not a perfect sphere, but an oblate spheroid, bulging at the equator from its constant rotation. Chimborazo, positioned just 1 degree south of the equator, rides this bulge upward into space. Mountaineers who summit Chimborazo stand closer to the stars than anyone on Everest, though they climb to only 20,564 feet above sea level compared to Everest's 29,032 feet. This Andean giant was thought to be the world's tallest mountain until the mid-19th century, and in a sense, those early geographers were right. They just measured from the wrong starting point. Rome spreads across its 7 hills, nearly a full degree of latitude north of New York City, sitting at 41.9 degrees north, while Manhattan rests at 40.7 degrees. This revelation disrupts our entire sense of European climate and positioning. The city we associate with Mediterranean warmth and Southern European culture actually aligns more closely with Chicago's latitude than with any major American city we'd consider southern. The Mediterranean Sea performs climate magic that our North American experience cannot comprehend, creating warmth at latitudes where the American continent offers only harsh winters. If Rome sat at its same latitude in North America, it would experience winters like those of coastal Connecticut or Rhode Island. This northerly positioning of Mediterranean cities reflects a broader truth about Europe existing much further north than our cultural associations suggest. The Sahara Desert harbors mountain peaks that regularly wear caps of snow, particularly in Algeria's Hoggar Mountains, where the town of Ain Sefra has recorded snowfall multiple times in recent decades. The desert's elevation changes dramatically across its 3.6 million square miles, rising to peaks above 11,000 feet, where temperatures plummet below freezing on winter nights. These Saharan mountains trap moisture from rare storm systems, converting it to snow that falls on landscapes we imagine as eternally hot and dry. Camels walk through snowdrifts, leaving prints that seem to belong to a different planet entirely. The mental image of the Sahara as an endless sea of hot sand dissolves when you realize it contains mountains higher than many alpine peaks, volcanic fields, and vast rocky plateaus where snow becomes not just possible but periodic. Canada's southernmost point dips so far south that it undercuts the entire northern borders of California, Nevada, and Utah. Middle Island, a tiny, uninhabited speck in Lake Erie, sits at 41.7 degrees north latitude, the same as Rome, Barcelona, and Istanbul. This Canadian territory extends further south than dozens of U.S. cities we think of as definitively American and temperate. The accident of the Great Lakes geometry has given Canada a toehold in latitudes we associate with wine country and Mediterranean climates. Paley Island, just north of Middle Island, produces wine from vineyards at the same latitude as Northern California's Mendocino County. This southern extension of Canada confounds Americans who imagine their northern neighbor as a land of perpetual winter, not realizing that millions of Canadians live south of Seattle, Minneapolis, and much of Maine. The Dead Sea continues its steady descent toward the center of the Earth, currently sitting at 1,412 feet below sea level and dropping 3 feet every year. This isn't the stable landmark we imagine, but a dynamic system in crisis, shrinking so rapidly that sinkholes open regularly along its shores, swallowing roads and buildings. The water level has dropped 100 feet since the 1960s, when nations began diverting the Jordan River for irrigation. What we call the Dead Sea is actually 2 separate bodies of water now, divided by a land bridge that emerged from the receding waters. Hotels built with beachfront access in the 1980s now require shuttle buses to reach the water's edge, a mile away from their original beaches. This hypersaline lake that has existed for 3 million years might disappear entirely within this century, transforming from geographical fixture to geographical memory. Norway's coastline performs a fractal magic trick that seems to violate the basic principles of measurement. If you were to walk along every inlet, fjord, and island edge, you would travel 63,000 miles, enough to circle the equator 2.5 times. This impossibly long coastline exists because Norway's shore refuses to be simple, fracturing into thousands of fjords that themselves branch into smaller inlets, which branch again into even smaller coves. The concept of coastline length becomes almost meaningless at this scale of complexity. Every zoom level reveals new intricacies, new peninsulas and islands that add thousands of miles to the total. The famous Norwegian Hurtigruten coastal voyage covers 2,500 miles, but only traces the most basic outline of this geographical fractal. Maps of Norway's coast look more like the edge of a shattered window than a nation's boundary. Detroit, Michigan, sits directly north of Windsor, Canada, creating one of geography's most counterintuitive border crossings. Travelers drive south from the United States to enter Canada, their compasses contradicting every assumption about North American geography. The Detroit River bends at just the right angle to place Canada's southernmost city directly below America's Motor City. This arrangement exists because the Great Lakes don't follow the neat east-west line we imagine for the US-Canadian border. Instead, they create elaborate peninsulas and water boundaries that place parts of Canada well south of nearby American territory. Standing on Detroit's riverfront, you look south toward Canada, while Canadians in Windsor watch the sun set behind the United States to their north. This reversal of expected directions has confused visitors since the cities were founded, creating a border that defies our basic sense of national positioning. The Amazon River once flowed in the opposite direction, draining westward into the Pacific Ocean until the Andes rose from tectonic collision 15 million years ago. This rising wall of mountains reversed the entire drainage of a continent, forcing the Amazon to find a new path eastward to the Atlantic. The evidence remains written in the sediments beneath the river, layers that tell the story of this continental scale reversal. Before the Andes emerged, a massive wetland covered much of the Amazon basin, neither fully river nor fully lake, slowly draining toward the Pacific through valleys that no longer exist. The rise of the Andes created not just mountains, but transformed the entire hydrology of South America, turning the Amazon into the eastward flowing giant we know today. This reversal represents one of Earth's most dramatic geographical revisions, a complete rewriting of continental drainage that happened slowly enough for life to adapt, but dramatically enough to leave clear evidence. Iceland grows wider every year as the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates pull apart beneath it, adding about 2 inches annually to the island's width. This expansion happens primarily along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which runs directly through Iceland's center, visible on land as a series of volcanic rift valleys. You can walk through Thingvellir National Park and place one foot on the North American plate and the other on the Eurasian plate, standing in the gap that widens with each passing year. The island exists only because volcanic activity along this spreading ridge builds land faster than the plates pull it apart. Iceland is essentially a wound in the earth that keeps trying to heal itself through volcanic eruption, creating new land even as tectonic forces try to tear it apart. In 100 million years, assuming current rates continue, Iceland will have torn into 2 separate islands, each riding its own continental plate away from the other. Los Angeles has drifted so far east in its sprawling growth that it now sits east of 6 state capitals, including Salem, Oregon, and Olympia, Washington. The city's eastward position becomes even more surprising when you realize that Bakersfield, still unmistakably in California's Central Valley, sits east of the entire coastline of Oregon and Washington. This happens because the Pacific coast performs a great eastward bend in Southern California, turning what we imagine as a north-south coastline into something more diagonal. The mental map that places Los Angeles firmly on the western edge of the continent falls apart when you examine actual longitudes. This unexpected positioning explains why flights from Los Angeles to Seattle often route inland over Nevada and Oregon rather than following the coastline, taking advantage of the fact that the straight-line path crosses inland territory rather than ocean. The Scottish Highlands and the Appalachian Mountains were once the same mountain range, split apart by the opening of the Atlantic Ocean 200 million years ago. These mountains formed when the ancient continents of Laurentia and Baltica collided, pushing up peaks that may have rivaled today's Himalayas. The Scottish Highlands, Norway's mountains, and the Appalachians from Georgia to Newfoundland all share the same geological bones, the same ancient rocks formed in the same mountain-building event. You can find identical rock formations in Scotland and North Carolina, separated now by 3,000 miles of ocean, but once pressed together in a single mountain chain. This ancient connection explains the surprising geological similarities between these distant lands, why the same minerals appear in the Scottish Highlands and the mountains of Tennessee. The Atlantic Ocean exists as a scar between 2 halves of the same geological structure. Chile's sovereignty extends across 3 continents, though we rarely think of this South American nation as a tricontinental power. Beyond its famous 2,650-mile length along South America's Pacific coast, Chile claims territory in Antarctica and owns Easter Island in Polynesia, technically part of Oceania. This gives Chile a presence in South America, Antarctica, and Oceania simultaneously, a geographical spread that few nations achieve. Easter Island alone sits 2,300 miles from Chile's mainland, further than the distance from New York to Los Angeles, yet it remains Chilean territory. Chile's Antarctic claim extends to the South Pole itself, though international treaties keep such claims in diplomatic suspension. This tricontinental reach transforms Chile from a simple coastal nation into something more complex, a country whose territory spans from tropical Polynesia to the frozen Antarctic interior. Point Nemo in the Pacific Ocean represents the ultimate geographical isolation, a location so remote that the nearest humans are often astronauts passing overhead in the International Space Station, 258 miles above. The closest land to Point Nemo is Ducie Island, an uninhabited atoll 1,670 miles away. This oceanic pole of inaccessibility sits in a vast expanse of empty ocean larger than the entire continent of North America. Ships avoid this region because it offers no ports, no islands, no reason to burn fuel crossing its emptiness. The ocean here reaches depths of 13,000 feet, and marine life is sparse due to the lack of nutrients in these remote waters. Point Nemo has become the designated spacecraft cemetery, where space agencies crash their defunct satellites and space stations, knowing that no ship will ever accidentally encounter the falling debris in this liquid desert. Africa spans all 4 hemispheres simultaneously, the only continent to achieve this remarkable geographical feat. The equator cuts through the middle of Africa, while the prime meridian slices through its western portion, creating a continental crossing of our planet's major dividing lines. Parts of Africa exist in the northern and southern hemispheres, the eastern and western hemispheres, all at once. This 4-hemisphere span gives Africa a claim to being Earth's most centrally positioned continent, despite our maps often pushing it to the margins. The arbitrary placement of the prime meridian through Greenwich, England, accidentally created this unique status for Africa. If the prime meridian had been placed through Paris or Washington as was once proposed, Africa would have lost this distinction. This 4-way hemispheric presence reflects Africa's true position as the geographical center of the human world. Lake Baikal in Russia contains more fresh water than all 5 North American Great Lakes combined, holding an astounding 20% of Earth's unfrozen fresh water in a single basin. This Siberian lake plunges to depths of 5,687 feet, deep enough to stack 4 Empire State Buildings and still not break the surface. Lake Baikal is so vast that if it were to drain, it would take all the world's rivers combined 1 full year to refill it. The lake is also ancient beyond comprehension, at 25 million years old, making it older than most mountain ranges and far older than any other lake on Earth. Most lakes fill with sediment and disappear within tens of thousands of years, but Baikal continues to deepen as tectonic forces pull its basin apart. This single Siberian lake holds more water than most countries possess in all their rivers, lakes, and aquifers combined, a freshwater ocean hidden in the heart of Asia. Vatican City holds nearly 5,000 souls within its ancient walls, creating a population density of 4,900 people per square mile. Yet this figure, impressive as it sounds, makes it less densely packed than Monaco, Singapore, or even Manhattan on an ordinary Tuesday. The misconception arises from our image of Vatican City as impossibly cramped, a postage stamp of sovereignty drowsed with tourists and clergy. But the reality breathes differently. The papal gardens alone claim half the nation's territory, their manicured paths and hidden grottos creating space where cardinals walk in contemplation. The Apostolic Palace contains vast halls that echo with footsteps, rooms that have stood empty for centuries, libraries where dust motes drift through colored light from stained glass windows. This smallest nation maintains its own postal system, prints its own euros, broadcasts its own radio programs into the Italian night. The population swells each morning as lay workers arrive from Rome, then contracts each evening like a tide pulling back, leaving the Swiss guards to patrol streets that grow quiet under Mediterranean stars. The Mediterranean Sea once disappeared entirely, transforming into a salt-crusted wasteland deeper than Death Valley. This happened 5.6 million years ago, during what scientists call the Messinian salinity crisis, when tectonic movements sealed the Strait of Gibraltar, cutting the sea off from the Atlantic. Without the Atlantic's replenishing waters, the Mediterranean evaporated under the relentless sun, leaving behind salt deposits 2 miles thick in places. These crystalline layers still lie beneath the current seafloor, evidence of when this sea was a series of hypersaline lakes surrounded by salt deserts. The basin would have been a landscape from another planet, with temperatures reaching 150 degrees Fahrenheit at its lowest points, 3 miles below sea level. Then, in one of Earth's most dramatic moments, the Atlantic burst through Gibraltar again. The waterfall that resulted would have dwarfed Niagara by 1,000 times, refilling the entire Mediterranean in perhaps just 2 years. The roar would have been heard across 3 continents as the sea rushed back to reclaim its basin. Edinburgh spreads across its volcanic hills at the same latitude as Moscow, both cities perched at 56 degrees north. Yet Edinburgh's winters bring rain and wind, while Moscow buries itself in snow and temperatures that freeze mercury. This same latitude that gives Moscow its continental severity grants Edinburgh merely Gothic mists and the occasional frost. The Gulf Stream performs this transformation, carrying Caribbean warmth across the Atlantic to wash against Scotland's shores. Without this oceanic river of heat, Edinburgh would resemble Labrador or the Kamchatka Peninsula, places at similar latitudes where winter means survival rather than inconvenience. The castle that dominates Edinburgh's skyline would overlook not a living city, but a frozen wasteland, its volcanic crag rising from tundra rather than gardens. This accident of ocean currents has allowed Scottish civilization to flourish at latitudes where most of the world offers only caribou and permafrost, creating a mismatch between latitude and lived experience that confounds our geographical expectations. Australia drifts northward at 2.7 inches every year, the fastest moving continent on our restless planet. This seemingly gentle pace has real consequences that ripple through modern technology. GPS coordinates for Australian locations must be updated regularly as the continent's movement causes navigational errors that accumulate over time. A coordinate that marked a specific building corner in 1994 now points to a spot nearly 6 feet away. Australia rides the Indo-Australian Plate northward toward Indonesia, closing the Timor Sea imperceptibly, but inevitably. In 50 million years, should current movement continue, Australia will collide with Asia, pushing up new mountain ranges where tropical seas now separate the continents. This northward sprint, geologically speaking, has already carried Australia from Antarctic latitudes to its current position. The kangaroos and eucalyptus trees that seem so essentially Australian evolved when the continent sat much further south, adapting to warming conditions as their homeland sailed north across the planet's surface. The closest point between Russia and the United States measures a mere 2.4 miles, the width of a comfortable morning walk. Big Diomede Island belongs to Russia, while Little Diomede belongs to Alaska, separated by a strait so narrow you can see people on the opposite shore on clear days. This proximity seems impossible given how we imagine these superpowers separated by vast Pacific distances. Yet here, in the Bering Strait, the continents almost touch, divided by a water gap narrower than many rivers. During winter, An ice bridge sometimes forms between the islands, theoretically allowing passage on foot, though political boundaries make such crossings impossible. The international date line runs between these islands, meaning Big Diomede sits 21 hours ahead of Little Diomede, despite being visible from its shores. Residents of Little Diomede can literally look into tomorrow, seeing a Tuesday sunrise on Big Diomede while still living through Monday evening. Mount Thor on Baffin Island presents the world's greatest vertical drop, a granite wall that falls 4,111 feet of pure, uninterrupted stone. This Canadian giant overshadows even Yosemite's famous El Capitan, though it remains virtually unknown outside climbing circles. The west face of Mount Thor achieves an angle beyond vertical, actually overhanging at 105 degrees, meaning climbers must dangle in space, pulled outward by gravity as they ascend. The rock face catches Arctic light in ways that seem impossible, glowing gold at midnight during summer's endless days, then disappearing into polar night for months. Inuit legends speak of this mountain as the home of the sky god, and standing at its base, you understand why. The wall rises beyond comprehension, beyond the ability of eyes to properly measure, disappearing into clouds that seem impossibly high above. This granite monument exists in such remote territory that more people have summited Everest than have stood at Mount Thor's base. France's longest land border stretches not along the Rhine or through the Alps, but through the Amazon rainforest, where French Guiana meets Brazil for 450 miles. This South American frontier exceeds any boundary France shares with its European neighbors, though few remember that France maintains sovereignty over this jungle territory. French Guiana remains fully part of France, not a colony or territory, but an integral department where euros change hands and European Union law applies beneath the canopy of tropical trees. The border follows rivers that wind through some of Earth's most biodiverse forests, where French gendarmes patrol in boats and indigenous peoples cross freely as they have for millennia. This Amazonian frontier means France shares a border with Brazil, longer than Germany's entire Rhine boundary, a geographical fact that reshapes our understanding of what and where France truly is. The Caspian Sea continues its steady shrinkage, falling 7 centimeters annually and having dropped 5 feet since 1996 alone. This ancient body of water, the world's largest lake despite its name, is dying of thirst as the Volga River and other tributaries deliver less water while evaporation accelerates under rising temperatures. The retreating shoreline leaves behind salt flats that stretch for miles, former ports now stranded far from water's edge like bones in a desert. Fishing villages that thrived for centuries find themselves overlooking dusty plains where the Caspian's waters once lapped. The sea's surface has fluctuated dramatically throughout history, but this current decline threatens to be different, potentially permanent. The sturgeon that produce the world's caviar lose spawning grounds with each foot the water drops. Oil platforms designed for certain water depths must be modified or abandoned. 5 nations watch their shared sea shrink, unable to agree on any action that might slow its disappearance. Poland's geographic center has migrated 100 miles since 1939, pulled westward by the violent redrawing of borders during and after World War II. What was once the nation's heart now lies in Lithuania, while the new center sits near the town of Piontek, a place that never imagined itself as central to anything. This shift represents one of history's most dramatic peacetime relocations of a nation's territory. Poland essentially moved westward as a whole, losing its eastern lands to the Soviet Union while gaining German territory in the west. Cities that were German for centuries became Polish overnight, while Polish cities in the east became Soviet. The geographic center's journey from near Łódź to Piontek traces the story of 20th century Europe, where nations could be moved like chess pieces, their centers recalculated with each treaty. Damascus and Baghdad receive more annual rainfall than London, a fact that overturns our assumptions about Middle Eastern aridity and British dampness. Damascus averages 16 inches of rain annually, concentrated in winter months when Mediterranean storms sweep inland. Baghdad, though receiving only 6 inches, still manages more precipitation than many imagine for a city synonymous with desert heat. These ancient capitals experience proper rainy seasons that turn their surrounding lands green, supporting agriculture that has existed for millennia. London's reputation for rain comes not from volume, but from frequency, its 23 inches falling as persistent drizzle rather than meaningful storms. The Middle Eastern cities experience rain as drama, torrential downpours that flood streets and wake residents with thunder, while London's rain arrives like a houseguest who won't leave, gentle but persistent. This reversal of expected precipitation patterns reminds us that our climate stereotypes often reflect cultural impressions rather than meteorological reality. New Zealand sits 200 miles from Australia, the same distance that separates London from Moscow. This Tasman Sea Gap destroys the notion of neighborly proximity that maps suggest when they frame Australia and New Zealand together. The journey between them crosses waters that rank among the world's roughest, where the Southern Ocean's swells build unimpeded across thousands of miles. Ships take 3 days to cross what looks like a narrow gap on globe, battling seas that have claimed countless vessels. New Zealand's isolation equals that of many mid-ocean islands, despite our habit of pairing it with Australia. The two nations evolved completely different ecosystems during their 85 million years of separation. No native land mammals reached New Zealand until humans arrived, while Australia developed its famous marsupials. This 1,000-mile moat of turbulent water created two different worlds that we mistakenly imagine as neighboring. The Arctic Ocean warms at twice the global average rate, gaining heat with an urgency that surprises even climate scientists who predicted this amplification. Ice that reflected sunlight for millennia now melts to reveal dark water that absorbs heat instead, creating a feedback loop that accelerates its own warming. The Arctic Ocean of today would be unrecognizable to explorers from just decades ago. Summer ice coverage has shrunk by half since 1980, and the remaining ice grows thinner each year. Polar bears swim distances that would have killed their ancestors, searching for ice flows that no longer exist. The Northwest Passage, sought for centuries as a shipping route, now opens regularly in summer, though filled with the hazards of drifting ice. This warming ocean sends ripples through global weather patterns, disrupting the jet stream and sending Arctic cold into unexpected latitudes, while the Arctic itself experiences unprecedented heat. Spain contains Europe's only true desert in Tabernas, Almeria, where rainfall amounts to less than 8 inches annually. This pocket of genuine aridity exists just miles from the Mediterranean, trapped in the rain shadow of surrounding sierras that steal moisture from passing clouds. The landscape looks more like Arizona than Europe, with badlands carved by flash floods, sparse vegetation clinging to life, and a silence that seems imported from another continent. Sergio Leone filmed his spaghetti westerns here precisely because it could double for the American Southwest, building fake frontier towns that still stand as tourist attractions. The desert experiences temperature swings of 50 degrees between day and night, true desert behavior in a continent we associate with temperate conditions. Scientists study Tibernus as an analog for Mars, its harsh conditions and minimal rainfall creating one of Earth's most Mars-like environments, hidden improbably in southern Spain. Tokyo sits at 35.6 degrees north latitude, placing it south of San Francisco, Madrid, and Rome, cities we perceive as definitively southern in their respective contexts. This revelation disrupts our mental placement of global cities, showing how cultural associations override actual positioning. Tokyo shares its latitude with Tehran, Las Vegas, and Memphis, Tennessee, far from the northern position we imagine for Japan. The city's southern placement explains its humid subtropical climate, its summer rainy season, and the occasional typhoon that would seem out of place if Tokyo sat where we mentally position it. Cherry blossoms bloom in Tokyo, while cities at similar latitudes in America still endure winter, the Pacific's moderating influence creating seasons that don't match the latitude. This southern positioning of Tokyo reflects a broader misunderstanding of Japan's location, the entire nation sitting further south than most of Europe and much of North America. Russia spans 11 time zones while China uses only one, a contrast that reveals how politics can override geography in the organization of time. When it's noon in Moscow, it's already 11 p.m. in Kamchatka, the sun having traveled nearly halfway around the planet between Russian territories. Meanwhile, China forces its entire width, equivalent to 5 time zones, to follow Beijing time. In China's western Xinjiang province, the sun doesn't reach its peak until 3 p.m. official time, and sunset arrives after 10 p.m. in summer. Some communities maintain unofficial local time, creating a parallel temporal reality. Russia's multiple zones reflect geographical truth, while China's single zone represents political unity imposed on geographical diversity. The contrast shows time zones as human constructs that can honor or ignore the sun's actual position. The Great Lakes contain 84% of North America's surface fresh water, but only 21% of the world's supply, not the majority that many assume. This statistical correction reminds us that Earth's fresh water hides in unexpected places. Lake Baikal alone contains more than all the Great Lakes, while the ice sheets of Antarctica and Greenland hold most of the planet's fresh water in frozen form. The Great Lakes seem incomparably vast when you stand on their shores, these inland seas that generate their own weather and swallow ships whole. Yet globally, they represent just one freshwater reserve among many. The Amazon River discharges more water into the Atlantic in 2 weeks than all the Great Lakes contain. This perspective shift doesn't diminish the Great Lakes' importance, but places them in global context. 5 lakes that loom large in North American consciousness, but occupy a smaller place in Earth's total water inventory. Antarctica's dry valleys haven't experienced rainfall in at least 2 million years, making them Earth's driest places, far exceeding even the Atacama Desert's aridity. These valleys exist because the transantarctic mountains block ice from flowing into them while fierce katabatic winds sublimate any snow directly into vapor. The result is exposed rock and soil in the middle of Antarctica, a polar desert more extreme than any hot desert on Earth. The valleys contain mummified seals, perfectly preserved by the cold and aridity, some thousands of years old, somehow having wandered inland to die in this lifeless place. Scientists use these valleys as Mars analogs, the closest thing Earth offers to Martian conditions. No rain, no snow, no ice, just rock and wind at temperatures that would freeze exposed water instantly if any existed. Life persists only as bacteria in the soil, organisms so hardy they might survive on other planets. Istanbul spreads across 2 continents with unequal distribution, 65% in Europe and 35% in Asia, not the even split many imagine. The Bosphorus Strait that divides the city runs barely 700 meters wide at its narrowest point, yet it separates continents, civilizations, and tectonic plates. 3 million people commute between continents daily, crossing from Asia to Europe for work, then returning to Asian suburbs at night. The European side contains the historic peninsula with its Byzantine and Ottoman monuments, while the Asian side stretches into vast residential districts unknown to tourists. This transcontinental city exists because of an ancient flood that created the Bosphorus, connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Without that geological accident, Istanbul would be a city in the middle of a continent, rather than the world's only metropolis that truly bridges east and west. The magnetic North Pole races toward Siberia at 34 miles per year, having accelerated from just 7 miles per year in the 1990s. This invisible point that compasses seek has always wandered, but never at this pace in recorded history. The pole has already traveled from Arctic Canada across the international dateline, heading toward Siberia with increasing speed. Navigation systems must be updated constantly to account for this drift. Airport runways designated by their magnetic heading require renumbering as the pole's movement changes their orientation relative to magnetic north. Scientists don't fully understand why the acceleration is happening, though it relates to flows in Earth's liquid iron outer core. The magnetic pole's journey reflects the dynamic nature of Earth's magnetic field, which has reversed entirely hundreds of times in geological history. We may be witnessing the early stages of such a reversal, though the process would take thousands of years to complete. Singapore sits just 85 miles north of the equator, closer to that global dividing line than any other sovereign nation's capital city. This proximity to Earth's widest point explains Singapore's unwavering climate, where every day resembles every other day in temperature and daylight. The sun rises at 7 a.m. and sets at 7 p.m. year-round, give or take a few minutes. Seasons don't exist except as variations in rainfall. The equatorial location that might seem a disadvantage has become Singapore's strength, providing consistent conditions for year-round shipping and commerce. The city exists at the perfect point where Earth's rotation creates permanent summer, where the concept of winter remains foreign, except as something that happens to other places. This equatorial positioning means Singapore experiences Earth's maximum rotational velocity, traveling eastward at over 1,000 miles per hour as the planet spins, faster than any city in the temperate zones. Lake Superior holds 3 quadrillion gallons of water, enough to flood all of North and South America to a depth of 1 foot. This single lake contains such volume that if it suddenly emptied, the water would submerge every city, every mountain below 1 foot, every prairie and desert from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego. The lake's surface spans 31,700 square miles, but its depth, reaching down 1,133 feet, creates the true reservoir. Superior is less a lake than a freshwater sea that forgot to be salty. November storms on Superior generate waves exceeding 30 feet, tall enough to wash over 3-story buildings. Ships vanish here without trace, pulled down into water so cold that bodies don't decompose, don't surface, but remain suspended in the deep like offerings to something ancient. The Ojibwe called it Gichigami, the Great Water, understanding that this was no mere lake, but something more primal, a piece of the ocean that chose to stay behind when the seas retreated. Reykjavik heats 90% of its buildings not with furnaces burning fossil fuels, but with water pulled from volcanic depths beneath the island. The city sits atop a geological furnace where magma chambers heat underground water to temperatures that would kill on contact. Yet this same deadly heat warms kindergarten classrooms and hospital wards throughout the polar night. Pipes carry this geothermal gift through the city's frozen ground, delivering Earth's own warmth to radiators and hot water taps. The system transforms what could be a barely habitable Arctic outpost into a thriving capital where people swim outdoors in geothermally heated pools while snow falls on their heads. Even the sidewalks in downtown Reykjavik stay free of ice through winter, warmed by the same subterranean heat that creates the island's geysers. This city has essentially plugged itself into the planet's internal heating system, drawing warmth from the same forces that split continents apart. The English Channel was once a river valley where the Thames and Rhine met as tributaries, flowing together toward an Atlantic Ocean that lay far to the west. Until 450,000 years ago, you could have walked from London to Paris through a landscape of forests and meadows, following rivers that no longer exist. The Thames flowed eastward then, joining the Rhine system that drained much of northern Europe. Woolly mammoths crossed this valley, leaving footprints in mud that would later be buried beneath hundreds of feet of seawater. Then, catastrophic floods, perhaps from the breaching of an ice dam, carved the channel in a geological instant. The water came with such force that it gouged valleys in solid bedrock that remain visible on the seafloor today. Britain became an island through this violence, separated from Europe by a disaster that reshaped the destiny of nations not yet imagined. Cairo spreads along the Nile at 30 degrees north latitude, placing Egypt's capital further north than Houston, New Orleans, and Jacksonville. This northern positioning contradicts our mental map that places Cairo vaguely down there in the hot global south. The city shares its latitude with the beaches of northwest Florida, the hills of northern Mississippi, and the deserts of far west Texas. Yet Cairo's proximity to the Sahara creates conditions those American cities never experience, where summer temperatures reach levels that make afternoon movement dangerous. The latitude that gives Houston its subtropical humidity gives Cairo its desert extremes. This reminds us that latitude alone doesn't determine climate, that position on the globe is just one factor in the complex equation of local weather. Cairo sits level with cities Americans consider definitively southern, yet it exists in a different climatic universe entirely. Mongolia's population density barely reaches 5 people per square mile, making it emptier than Alaska, emptier than the Australian outback, emptier than almost anywhere humans have chosen to establish nations. In Mongolia's vast grasslands, you can travel for days without seeing another person, just the occasional herder moving with seasons that haven't changed in millennia. The country contains 1.5 million square kilometers, but only 3 million people, most crowded into the single city of Ulaanbaatar. The rest is wind and grass and sky, a landscape so empty it seems to belong to a younger Earth before humans multiplied across its surface. This emptiness isn't barren, but full of different things: wild horses, soaring eagles, and a silence so complete you can hear your own blood moving. Mongolia proves that nations don't require density, that sovereignty can stretch across emptiness, that sometimes the spaces between people matter more than the places where they gather. The Baltic Sea is younger than human civilization, having formed only 8,000 years ago as the last ice age retreated. When the pyramids were built, this sea was half its current size. When humans first planted wheat, the Baltic was still becoming, fed by melting glaciers that had pressed the land down below sea level. The cities around its shores are older than the sea itself in some cases. They're founding myths, speaking of different waters, different coastlines. This infant sea continues evolving, growing less salty as rivers dilute its connection to the ocean. In winter, much of it freezes solid enough to drive cars across, returning briefly to something like its glacial past. The Baltic reminds us that even seas are temporary, that what seems eternal to human perception is merely a moment in geological time. Our maps show it as permanent, but it's really just a pause between ice ages. Lake Titicaca sits at 12,507 feet above sea level, so high that visitors often struggle to breathe while local children play soccer on its shores without pause. This lake exists at an altitude where many mountains end, yet it stretches 120 miles long and 50 miles wide, a vast water body suspended in the thin air of the Altiplano. The lake is deep enough and large enough to moderate the otherwise brutal climate at this elevation, creating pockets where potatoes and quinoa grow at heights that should support only grass and stones. Ancient civilizations built reed boats here that still sail today, their designs unchanged since before the Inca. The atmospheric pressure at Titicaca equals only 60% of sea level, meaning water boils at 187 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 212, making even cooking an adventure in physics. Seahorses swim in this freshwater lake, descendants of ocean creatures trapped when tectonic forces lifted an ancient bay into the sky millions of years ago. London sprawls across the Thames at 51.5 degrees north latitude, further north than the entire continental United States except Alaska, further north than the southern tip of Hudson Bay. The city sits level with the Aleutian Islands and the wind-scoured coast of Labrador, places Americans associate with Arctic desolation. Yet London maintains its gardens and its outdoor cafes through powers that seem almost magical when you consider its position on the globe. The Gulf Stream performs this magic, delivering warmth from the Caribbean to a city that should, by latitude alone, resemble Edmonton or Winnipeg. Without this oceanic heat conveyor, London would be buried in snow half the year, the Thames frozen solid enough for winter fairs as it was during the Little Ice Age. Big Ben would chime over a landscape of ice rather than the gentle rains that define the city's character. This northern positioning of one of the world's great metropolises shows how ocean currents matter more than latitude in determining where civilization can flourish. The Mississippi River Delta loses a football field of land every 100 minutes, Louisiana disappearing into the Gulf of Mexico at a rate visible within human lifetimes. Since 1932, the state has lost an area larger than Delaware, and the loss accelerates each year. Towns that once sat secure behind miles of marshland now face open ocean. Graveyards disappear beneath the waves, their dead carried away by currents that respect no human boundaries. The river that built this land over millennia no longer delivers enough sediment to maintain it, its mud trapped behind upstream dams or channeled directly to deep water through levees that prevent the natural flooding that once refreshed the delta. Maps of Louisiana become obsolete within years, showing land that has already vanished beneath the waves. This isn't erosion in the gentle sense, but geographic erasure, an entire culture's landscape dissolving in real time. Mount Everest grows 4 millimeters taller each year, as the Indian tectonic plate continues its ancient collision with Asia. The mountain we measure so precisely today will be different tomorrow, pushed skyward by forces that began when India was an island continent, racing northward across an ancient ocean. This growth seems tiny, less than the width of a pencil lead, yet over geological time, it adds up to miles of elevation. The summit that Edmund Hillary reached in 1953 now sits inches higher than the one George Mallory attempted in 1924. GPS measurements must be updated regularly to account for this growth. The mountain isn't just growing upward, but also moving northeast at about the same rate, wandering across the landscape over millions of years. Everest reminds us that even our planet's seemingly permanent features are in constant motion, that the roof of the world is still under construction. Venice rests at precisely 45.4 degrees north latitude, the same parallel that runs through Ottawa and Portland, Oregon. These three cities share the same angular relationship with the equator, yet exist in completely different worlds. Venice slowly sinks into its lagoon, while Ottawa freezes solid and Portland drowns in rain. The latitude that gives Ottawa its crushing winter cold grants Venice merely aqua alta, those high tides that flood St. Mark's Square but never freeze it. This shared latitude highlights how meaningless such measurements can be without context. The Adriatic Sea moderates Venice's climate, while continental forces brutalize Ottawa. Venice's position at this latitude explains its particular quality of light, neither Mediterranean bright nor Nordic dim, but something in between that has inspired painters for centuries. The city exists at a mathematical point on the globe that it shares with wilderness and other cities, yet remains utterly unique in its relationship with water and stone. The Mariana Trench plunges so deep that Mount Everest could be placed at its bottom with 7,000 feet of water still above its peak. This gash in Earth's crust reaches down 36,200 feet, deeper than mountains are tall, deeper than most human imagination can properly grasp. At the bottom, pressure reaches 1,000 times that at sea level, enough to crush a human body in milliseconds. Water itself behaves strangely at these pressures, becoming 5% denser than at the surface. Life exists even here, creatures so alien they seem designed for another planet, living in eternal darkness under pressure that would liquefy surface organisms. The trench is less explored than the moon's surface, its depths hiding ecosystems we're only beginning to discover. This deepest place on Earth exists because the Pacific Plate dives beneath the Philippine Plate, descending into the mantle to be recycled into magma that will someday emerge from volcanoes. Stockholm receives 1,181 hours of sunshine annually, more than London's 1,633 hours or Paris's 1,662 hours, despite sitting far to their north. This Swedish capital enjoys long summer days that compensate for dark winters, with June nights when darkness never fully arrives. The city's position at 59 degrees north should condemn it to gloom, yet it manages more sunshine than cities we associate with light and warmth. Stockholm's archipelago setting helps, with water reflecting and amplifying available light, creating a luminous quality that photographers chase. The city has adapted to make the most of its sunshine, with outdoor cafes that open the moment warmth arrives and a population that treats sunny days as religious holidays. This unexpected sunshine abundance shows how our assumptions about northern cities often prove wrong, how latitude alone doesn't determine the quality of light a place receives. Algeria sprawls across 9,595 square miles of North Africa, making it the continent's largest country since South Sudan's independence redrew the map in 2011. Before that separation, Sudan held the title, but geography is never as permanent as we imagine. Algeria extends from Mediterranean beaches to Saharan sand seas, containing climates that range from alpine to hyper-arid. The country is so vast that its southern borders touch Mali, Niger, and Libya in regions where borders exist more as concepts than physical realities. Most of Algeria's territory is Sahara, inhabited only by nomads and oil workers, while 90% of its population clusters along the Mediterranean coast. This distribution creates a nation that is simultaneously empty and crowded, massive yet concentrated, more an empire of sand than a conventional country. The size defies governance, with southern towns closer to other African capitals than to Algiers. The Gulf Stream transports 100 times more water than all the world's rivers combined, a liquid conveyor belt moving at 4 billion cubic feet per second past Florida's coast. This ocean river carries more water than exists in all terrestrial rivers at any given moment, a flow so massive it defies comprehension. The current moves warm Caribbean water northward at speeds reaching 6 miles per hour, fast enough that ships have long used it as an oceanic highway. Without the Gulf Stream, Europe would resemble Siberia at similar latitudes. Britain would be tundra, France would freeze, and the Mediterranean would be too cold for its famous beach culture. This single current does more to determine global climate than any other ocean feature, yet it's invisible from shore, detectable only by its effects. The Gulf Stream is really Earth's heating system made liquid, redistributing tropical warmth to places that would otherwise be uninhabitable. Naples and New York City sit at exactly 40.7 degrees north latitude, twin cities separated by an ocean, but sharing the same angular distance from the equator. This precise alignment means they receive sunlight at identical angles throughout the year, their shadows falling in parallel across different continents. Yet Naples basks in Mediterranean warmth, while New York endures blizzards, showing how latitude is just one actor in climate's complex theater. The Mediterranean Sea acts as Naples' climate modifier, storing summer heat and releasing it through winter, while New York faces continental extremes with no sea to moderate its temperatures. When it's noon in Naples, the sun occupies the exact same position in the sky as it will in New York 6 hours later, yet the two cities might as well exist on different planets climatically. This shared latitude creates an invisible connection between the two cities, a mathematical twinning that their different characters obscure. Greenland's ice sheet presses down with such weight that it has deformed the bedrock beneath, pushing it 1,000 feet below sea level in places. The ice reaches 10,000 feet thick at its center, a frozen ocean standing on land that has forgotten its original shape. If this ice melted suddenly, Greenland would initially be an inland sea before the rock, freed from its burden, slowly rebounded over thousands of years. The weight is so immense that it affects Earth's rotation, and its melting is measurably changing the planet's distribution of mass. Satellites detect the ice sheets shrinking by measuring tiny changes in gravity as mass disappears. This ice represents 10% of Earth's fresh water, enough to raise global sea levels by 24 feet if it all melted. The sheet is so large it creates its own weather, so tall it scrapes moisture from passing clouds, so bright it reflects enough sunlight to influence global temperature. The Republic of Kiribati achieves something no other nation has managed, spanning all 4 hemispheres simultaneously. This nation of 33 coral atolls scattered across 1.3 million square miles of Pacific Ocean crosses both the equator and the international dateline, placing parts of itself in every possible hemispheric combination. Some islands exist in tomorrow while others remain in today. Some in the northern hemisphere while others lie south. Some eastern while others western. The nation is more ocean than land, with a total land area smaller than New York City, spread across an ocean area larger than India. This 4-hemisphere span happens partially by accident and partially by political maneuvering, as Kiribati adjusted the international dateline in 1995 to place all its territory in the same day. The nation exists at the intersection of all of Earth's invisible dividing lines, a country defined more by water than land, more by what it spans than what it contains. Death Valley recorded 134 degrees Fahrenheit on July 10, 1913, a temperature that remained the world record after Libya's claimed 136-degree reading was invalidated in 2012. This California furnace now officially holds Earth's highest reliably recorded temperature, measured at Furnace Creek during a heat wave that killed birds in mid-flight. The valley achieves these temperatures through perfect geographic circumstances, below sea level, surrounded by mountains, and positioned to trap descending air that compresses and heats as it falls. Summer ground temperatures can exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause severe burns through shoe soles. The rocks store heat through the day and radiate it at night, preventing any real cooling. Even at midnight in July, temperatures might not drop below 100 degrees. This hostile environment supports specialized life forms that exist nowhere else, having evolved to tolerate conditions that would kill most organisms in minutes. Norway owns Bouvet Island, the world's most remote island, floating alone in the South Atlantic, 404 miles from the nearest land. This volcanic specter rises from waters so violent that landing is possible only a few days per year. The island is 93% glacier covered, its black volcanic cliffs emerging from ice like something from another world. No one lives there, no one ever has, and likely no one ever will. The nearest humans are usually astronauts passing overhead or sailors traveling between Cape Town and Buenos Aires, but even they stay far away. Norway claimed this frozen nowhere in 1927, making it a dependency but never explaining why they wanted it. Seals and penguins use its beaches when ice permits, but even they seem to prefer other places. Bouvet Island exists as Earth's ultimate expression of isolation, a place that achieves perfect geographical loneliness in an ocean that seems infinite from its shores. The Nile River flows north through Egypt, not because of any magnetic pull, but because north happens to be downhill in this part of Africa. Rivers care nothing for compass directions, only for gravity's patient pull toward the sea. The Nile begins its journey in the highlands of Ethiopia and the lakes of Central Africa, places that sit thousands of feet above Egypt's Mediterranean coast. From these heights, the water finds its way downward, and downward happens to be north. This northward flow confuses those who unconsciously associate north with up on maps, forgetting that cartographic conventions have nothing to do with elevation. The ancient Egyptians understood this better, orienting their maps with south at the top, recognizing the Nile's source as the upper lands. The river doesn't defy nature by flowing north. It follows the same rules as every other river, seeking the lowest path to the sea. The confusion comes from our arbitrary decision to place north at the top of maps, creating a psychological association between cardinal directions and elevation that exists only in our minds. Bangladesh exists as a nation of rivers, with 700 waterways flowing through its territory, creating 435 miles of navigable channels that serve as liquid highways. This riverine abundance makes Bangladesh less a country with rivers than a river system with some land attached. The Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna converge here in the world's largest delta, their combined waters spreading like fingers across the landscape. During monsoon season, 1/3 of the country disappears beneath floodwaters, an annual drowning that inhabitants expect and accommodate. Houses rise on stilts, rice grows in flooded fields, and boats become the primary transportation as roads vanish beneath brown water. This watery nation exists because 3 of Earth's great rivers chose the same exit to the sea, creating a landscape that shifts between land and lake with the seasons. The soil here is among the planet's most fertile, renewed annually by Himalayan silt, supporting one of the highest population densities on Earth, despite the constant presence of water. Paris rests at 48.8 degrees north latitude, placing it definitively north of Montreal's 45.5 degrees, a reversal that scrambles our mental positioning of these French-speaking cities. The City of Light sits level with the northern tip of Newfoundland, further north than the entire population belt of Canada from Toronto to Quebec City. Yet Parisians sip wine at sidewalk cafes, while Montrealers huddle through 6-month winters, showing how the Atlantic Ocean and Gulf Stream reshape climate in ways that mock latitude. If Paris sat at its same latitude in North America, it would resemble Thunder Bay or Winnipeg, cities where winter means survival rather than style. The Eiffel Tower would overlook a frozen Seine, its iron framework creaking in temperatures that would empty the boulevards. This northerly position explains Paris's long summer days and brief winter sunlight, though ocean warmth masks the reality of its position on the globe. Montreal, supposedly the northern city, actually sits at the same latitude as Milan and Venice. The Red Sea widens by 1 inch each year as Africa and Arabia slowly divorce, pulled apart by tectonic forces that will eventually create a new ocean. This biblical water body is actually an ocean in birth, a crack in Earth's surface that grows measurably wider within human lifetimes. In 200 million years, assuming current rates continue, the Red Sea will rival the Atlantic in width. The spreading happens along the sea's central axis, where new seafloor emerges from volcanic rifts, pushing the continents apart like a wedge. Jeddah and Eritrea move away from each other at the same rate fingernails grow, imperceptible day to day, but measurable over decades. This widening will eventually split Africa in two, with the Horn of Africa becoming a massive island. The Red Sea represents Earth's geography in motion, proof that continents are not fixed, but temporary arrangements of rock floating on deeper currents of molten stone. Russia sold Alaska for 2 cents per acre in 1867, a price that would barely buy a candy today for land that contained more gold than the entire purchase price. The 586,412 square miles changed hands for $7.2 million, less than some Manhattan apartments cost now. Secretary of State William Seward faced ridicule for Seward's folly, this purchase of what critics called a frozen wasteland. Yet Alaska contained not just gold, but oil reserves worth trillions, fisheries that feed millions, and strategic position that proved invaluable during the Cold War. The Russians, exhausted from the Crimean War and fearing British conquest of Alaska from Canada, sold their North American territory for less than the cost of a single modern fighter jet. This transaction represents perhaps history's greatest real estate miscalculation, a transfer of wealth so vast that its full value still isn't fully calculated. Alaska's purchase price wouldn't buy a city block in modern Anchorage. Edinburgh and Copenhagen both sit west of Berlin, their positions on the European map defying the mental geography that places Germany centrally and Scotland and Denmark on the periphery. Berlin has drifted east in our imagination, pulled by Cold War associations and the idea of Eastern Europe, but geography doesn't care about political history. Edinburgh sits a full degree of longitude west of Berlin, while Copenhagen barely edges west of the German capital. This westerly positioning of supposedly peripheral cities shows how political geography overwrites physical geography in our minds. We imagine Europe with Germany at its heart, but the continent's actual geometry puts Berlin surprisingly far east. The Scottish capital and Danish capital bookend Germany from the west, though we think of them as northern outliers. This geographical confusion reflects how we organize space mentally according to historical and cultural importance rather than actual position. Angel Falls, plummets from the top of Tepuy in Venezuela, falling 3,012 feet in a single uninterrupted drop that makes Niagara Falls look like a minor rapid. The water falls so far that much of it evaporates or disperses into mist before reaching the bottom, creating a permanent cloud at the base. From the top, the bottom is invisible, hidden in perpetual fog created by the falling water's violence. The fall is 19 times taller than Niagara, so tall that weather patterns change around it, so massive it's visible from space as a white scar on the jungle green. Jimmy Angel, the American pilot who reported it to the outside world, crashed his plane on top of the Tepuy trying to land there, and it remained stranded for 33 years. The indigenous Pemon people always knew of the falls, calling them Karapakupai Meru, but kept their existence from outsiders, understanding that some wonders should remain hidden. The Philippines transforms with the tides, consisting of 7,641 islands at low tide, but only 7,107 at high water, with 534 islands disappearing twice daily beneath the waves. This shape-shifting nation expands and contracts with lunar rhythms, its territory determined by the moon's pull on Earth's oceans. The vanishing islands aren't proper land, but tidal features that emerge like temporary continents, exist for 6 hours, then submerge again. People have been caught on these disappearing islands, watching their land shrink as water rises, racing the tide back to permanent ground. Maps of the Philippines depend on when they're made, whether at high or low tide, creating a nation whose exact geography remains fluid. This tidal breathing of land in and out of existence happens everywhere but nowhere as dramatically as in this archipelago, where hundreds of pieces of the country have part-time existence. Santiago, Chile sits at 70.6 degrees west longitude, placing it east of New York City's 74 degrees west, despite Chile being on the Pacific coast and New York on the Atlantic. This impossible-seeming arrangement happens because South America extends so far east that its Pacific nations actually align with North America's Atlantic coast. The mental map that places Pacific cities definitively west of Atlantic ones fails when continents don't align as we expect. Santiago shares its longitude with Detroit and Cleveland, cities in America's interior, while supposedly being on the opposite edge of the opposite continent. This eastern positioning of western Chile demonstrates how our assumptions about continental arrangement rely on oversimplified models. The Pacific coast of South America curves back eastward, reaching toward Africa, while North America's Atlantic coast hasn't traveled as far east as we imagine. Luxembourg maintains the world's highest GDP per capita at $140,000, not through oil or gold, but through banking and European Union administration, achieving wealth that makes oil kingdoms look modest. This tiny nation, smaller than Rhode Island, has leveraged its position between France, Germany, and Belgium to become Europe's financial heart. The wealth concentrates in a country you can drive across in an hour, where every citizen theoretically generates more economic activity than almost anywhere else on Earth. Yet this wealth is partly fictional, existing in numbers moving through computers rather than actual production. Luxembourg proves that in modern economics, geography matters less than legislation, that a small country with the right laws can attract wealth from across the planet. The castles that once defended this pocket nation now overlook glass towers full of lawyers and bankers managing money that never physically enters the country. The Black Sea was a freshwater lake until 5600 BCE, when Mediterranean waters burst through the Bosphorus in a catastrophic flood that may have inspired flood myths across cultures. Before this breakthrough, the Black Sea Basin was a massive lake sitting far below ocean level, fed by European rivers, but isolated from the Mediterranean. When rising sea levels finally overtopped the Bosphorus land bridge, seawater poured in with the force of 200 Niagara Falls, raising the lake level by hundreds of feet and flooding an area the size of Florida. This deluge would have been audible for hundreds of miles, a roar that continued for months or years as the Mediterranean claimed the basin. Settlements along the former lakeshore vanished beneath advancing waters that moved miles inland each day. The memory of this flood possibly survived in the stories of Gilgamesh, Noah, and Deucalion, cultural memories of when the sea arrived with divine violence. Canada possesses more lakes than the rest of the world combined, with 2 million bodies of water covering 9% of its total area. This abundance seems impossible until you understand that glaciers carved the Canadian Shield into a landscape more water than land in places. From the air, northern Canada looks like blue, shattered glass, lakes connecting to lakes in infinite chains. Many of these lakes have never been named, never been fished, never had human eyes observe their shores. The province of Ontario alone contains 250,000 lakes, more than most continents. This fresh water wealth represents 1/5 of Earth's liquid fresh water, stored in millions of natural reservoirs. If Canada's lakes were spread evenly across Earth's land surface, they would create a layer 3 feet deep. The country is less a land mass with lakes than a collection of lakes held together by land. The Risha structure in Mauritania spans 30 miles across the Sahara, a perfect circular formation so large and symmetrical it's used as a landmark by astronauts. Originally thought to be a meteor crater, this Eye of the Sahara actually formed through erosion of a geological dome, nature carving a perfect bullseye in the desert. The concentric rings alternate between hard and soft rock layers, creating ridges and valleys that form circles within circles within circles. From ground level, the structure is invisible, too large to perceive, but from space it stares back at satellites like an unblinking eye. Ancient rivers carved this formation when the Sahara was green, and their courses still mark the landscape as ghostly channels in the rock. Some have suggested this might be the location of Atlantis, though geologists find this romantically unlikely. The structure serves now as a navigation point for trans-Saharan travelers, a compass rose carved by nature into Earth's surface. Tehran sprawls at the foot of the Alborz Mountains, receiving more annual snowfall than many European capitals, with 20 inches whitening this Iranian metropolis each winter. The city we associate with Middle Eastern heat becomes a winter wonderland from December to March, its 14 million residents navigating snowy streets beneath the white-capped Alborz peaks. Mount Tochal rises directly north of the city to 13,000 feet, supporting ski resorts that operate while date palms grow in the valleys below. Tehran's elevation at 3,900 feet places it higher than most European cities, in the zone where snow becomes regular rather than exceptional. This snowfall in a city we imagine as perpetually dusty and hot reflects our poor understanding of Middle Eastern geography, where mountains create climates that contradict our desert assumptions. Tehran's winter snow is as reliable as Stockholm's, though one city lies in Scandinavia and the other in the Islamic Republic. The geographic center of North America sits in Rugby, North Dakota, marked by a stone monument in this town of 3,000 people who never expected to be central to anything. The calculation includes everything from Panama to the Arctic Ocean, from Newfoundland to the Aleutians, placing the balance point in northern North Dakota rather than Kansas or Nebraska, where intuition might place it. Rugby erected a monument and painted a chapel claiming this distinction, though the calculation method remains disputed. The center has meaning only as a mathematical abstraction, the point where the continent would balance if it were a flat plate of uniform thickness. Yet rugby embraces its centrality, selling itself as the heart of the continent, though hearts are rarely found so far from bodies' warm cores. This geographic center sits in wheat fields that stretch to every horizon, perhaps appropriately for a continental midpoint. Madagascar separated from Africa 165 million years ago, but didn't part from India until 88 million years ago, explaining its biological uniqueness. The island's lemurs, chameleons, and baobabs evolved during its long journey across the Indian Ocean, carried like passengers on a continental raft. Madagascar once nestled against Mozambique, then drifted east attached to India, finally stopping in its current position as India continued toward its collision with Asia. This two-stage separation created evolutionary conditions found nowhere else, with African origins modified by tens of millions of years attached to India. 90% of Madagascar's species exist nowhere else on Earth, products of this unique geological journey. The island is less an island than an evolutionary laboratory that's been running experiments for 88 million years, creating life forms that seem designed for different planets. The Netherlands has engineered 26% of its land to exist below sea level, with some areas sitting 23 feet beneath where the ocean wants to be. This isn't natural land, but manufactured geography, created by draining lakes and ocean inlets, then maintaining them as dry land through constant pumping. The lowest point in the Netherlands would be underwater if humans stopped maintaining the pumps for even a few days. Amsterdam Airport sits 11 feet below sea level, meaning planes land below the surface of the nearby sea. The Dutch have reversed the natural order, living beneath the ocean through pure engineering will. Without human intervention, much of the Netherlands would return to the sea within years, cities like Rotterdam drowning as water reclaimed its former domain. This manufactured geography requires eternal vigilance, a nation that exists only through constant battle against water's desire to find its level. Anchorage receives only 16 inches of precipitation annually, less than Los Angeles's 18 inches, despite Alaska's reputation for endless snow and rain. This surprising dryness comes from Anchorage's position in the rain shadow of the Chugach Mountains, which steal moisture from Pacific storms. The snow that does fall tends to stick around, creating an illusion of abundance, but actual precipitation remains desert-like. Anchorage is technically drier than many Middle Eastern cities, though its cold temperatures prevent the evaporation that creates true aridity. The city's lawns need irrigation in summer, a fact that surprises visitors expecting Alaska to be perpetually damp. This low precipitation combines with long summer days to create growing conditions that produce famous giant vegetables, cabbages the size of beanbag chairs thriving in the land of the midnight sun. The Ural Mountains formed 300 million years ago when the supercontinent Pangaea assembled, making them older than the Atlantic Ocean, older than the Alps, older than most mountain ranges we consider ancient. These mountains have been worn down by time from Himalayan heights to gentle hills that barely deserve the name mountains in places. They watched the Atlantic Ocean birth and grow, saw dinosaurs evolve and die, witnessed the rise of mammals and eventually humans. The Urals divide Europe from Asia more by tradition than by dramatic geography, a boundary that exists more in human minds than in obvious physical reality. These ancient peaks contain some of Earth's richest mineral deposits, their aged rocks transformed by time and pressure into treasure houses of gems and metals. The Urals remind us that even mountains are mortal, that what once scraped the sky can be worn down to nubbins given enough time. Vatican City maintains its own postal system radio station, and newspaper, functioning as more than just religious headquarters, but as a fully operational nation compressed into 0.17 square miles. The Vatican Postal Service is preferred by Romans over the Italian postal system for its reliability, creating the odd sight of Italian citizens crossing into another country to mail letters. Vatican Radio broadcasts in 47 languages, reaching believers worldwide from transmitters that occupy significant portions of this tiny nation's territory. L'Osservatore Romano, the Vatican newspaper, has published since 1861, older than Italy itself as a unified nation. The Vatican mints its own euros, prints its own stamps, issues its own passports, maintains its own pharmacy that stocks medicines not available in Italy. This smallest nation operates with complexity that would challenge countries 1,000 times its size, proving that sovereignty doesn't require space, only recognition. Portland, Maine reaches toward Europe from a position 141 miles closer to the old continent than any other American city. This easternmost thrust of the United States sits on a longitude that few recognize as exceptional, yet ships departing Portland's harbor begin their Atlantic crossings with a head start measured in hours of sailing. The city's eastern position explains why it served as a major port during both World Wars, why dawn arrives here before anywhere else in America, why the weather systems that will reach Boston tomorrow touch Portland today. This geographical reaching toward Europe is visible in the architecture, the maritime culture, the gray Atlantic light that seems more Irish than American. Portland exists at America's forward edge, the last or first place depending on your direction of travel. The city watches the horizon where Europe lies invisible, but genuinely closer than from any other American shore. Sailors have always known this truth, choosing Portland as their jumping-off point for crossings that save fuel and time. Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela creates more lightning than anywhere else on Earth, experiencing electrical storms 260 nights per year, with 40,000 strikes illuminating the darkness nightly. This phenomenon, called Catatumbo lightning, has occurred for thousands of years, so reliable that colonial sailors used it for navigation. The lake's unique geography creates perfect storm conditions, warm water surrounded by mountains that trap Caribbean trade winds, forcing humid air upward into cooler altitudes where lightning is born. The storms begin almost exactly at sunset, continuing for up to 10 hours, creating a natural lighthouse visible for 250 miles. Indigenous peoples believed this was the spirits of fireflies gathering to honor the creation of the world. Scientists still don't fully understand why this one lake produces more lightning than anywhere else, why the storms stopped mysteriously for several months in 2010, then resumed as if nothing had happened. The lightning here isn't random, but follows patterns, striking the same general areas with punctuality that suggests purpose rather than chaos. The Gambia exists as a geographic curiosity, a nation that follows the Gambia River for 295 miles inland while never exceeding 30 miles in width. Senegal surrounds it entirely, except for a small Atlantic coastline, creating a country shaped like a worm burrowing into another nation. This strange geography resulted from colonial competition, with Britain claiming the river while France took the surrounding territory. The border was supposedly determined by how far a British gunboat could fire from the river, creating a nation defined by artillery range. Gambians must pass through Senegal to travel between many parts of their own country, while Senegalese must cross the Gambia to move between their nation's northern and southern regions. This geographic absurdity has persisted since independence, two countries intertwined like a puzzle where the pieces don't quite separate. The Gambia proves that nations can take any shape politics demands, that rivers can become countries, that geography serves human ambition rather than logic. Mount Kilimanjaro's ice cap has retreated from 4.7 square miles in 1912 to less than 0.7 square miles today, the snows that Hemingway called eternal proving remarkably temporary. The glaciers that crowned Africa's highest peak for 11,000 years are disappearing within a human lifetime, leaving bare rock where ice once reflected equatorial sun. Local guides speak of routes that crossed glaciers in their youth now passing over volcanic gravel. The ice loss isn't uniform, but creates isolated ice fields, remnant islands of white on the brown summit, like memories of what the mountain once was. Scientists debate whether the ice is disappearing due to warming, decreased precipitation, or increased solar radiation, but the result remains visible to anyone who climbs. The white cap that defined Kilimanjaro is becoming a bare skull. The mountain's name might mean White Mountain in Swahili, though this etymology grows less accurate each year. Within decades, Africa's iconic snow-capped peak may have no snow at all. South Africa embraces two entire nations within its borders, completely surrounding Lesotho and nearly encircling Eswatini, except for a small border with Mozambique. This geographic arrangement creates countries within a country, sovereign nations that exist as wholes in South Africa's territory. Lesotho sits entirely within South Africa, a mountain kingdom suspended above the surrounding lowlands like an island in the sky. Every import to Lesotho, every export, every visitor must pass through South Africa. Eswatini barely escapes the same complete encirclement, maintaining a 65-mile border with Mozambique that prevents total South African embrace. These enclaved nations exist because of historical accidents, kingdoms that survived colonial expansion by accepting geographic imprisonment. South Africa must maintain border posts not just at its edges, but deep within its own territory, creating the strange situation of internal international boundaries. Citizens of these nations live surrounded by another country, their sovereignty maintained by invisible lines drawn through identical landscapes. The Colorado River exhausts itself before reaching its destination, no longer completing its journey to the Gulf of California. Since 1998, except for rare flood years, the river that carved the Grand Canyon disappears into irrigation canals and desert sand before finding the sea. The mighty Colorado simply ends, evaporating into nothing in the Sonoran Desert. Where the river once built a vast delta supporting jaguars and millions of birds, there's now cracked earth and salt. Mexico's shrimp fisheries collapsed when the river stopped delivering nutrients to the Gulf. The river's entire flow has been allocated and over-allocated, promised to cities, farms, and states in quantities that exceed what actually flows. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the river's major reservoirs, have dropped to historically low levels, their bathtub rings showing where water once reached. This disappearance of a major river represents something new in Earth's history, a river killed not by geology, but by human thirst. Luxembourg remains the world's only Grand Duchy, a unique governmental form where a Grand Duke rather than a king or president serves as head of state. This isn't merely semantic difference, but represents a specific level of sovereignty, higher than a duchy, but not quite a kingdom, a gradation of nobility that most of the world has forgotten. The Grand Duke isn't purely ceremonial, but retains constitutional powers, though these are rarely exercised. This anachronistic system has survived while kingdoms and empires collapsed around it, protected by Luxembourg's small size and economic importance. The Grand Duchy maintains ceremonies and protocols from centuries past, a living museum of European aristocratic tradition compressed into 998 square miles. The current Grand Duke lives in a palace in the middle of Luxembourg City, ruling over one of the world's wealthiest nations per capita, with traditions that predate most modern nations. Istanbul carried the name Constantinople officially until 1930, 7 years after the Republic of Turkey formed, the ancient name persisting long after the Byzantine Empire vanished. The city had been Ottoman Istanbul for centuries in common usage, but official documents, postal services, and international recognition continued using Constantinople into the 20th century. The name change was less a renaming than an official acknowledgement of what people already called the city. Even today, the Ecumenical Patriarch signs documents from Constantinople, maintaining the Byzantine name in Orthodox Christian usage. The city has worn many names through its history: Byzantium, Augusta Antonina, New Rome, Constantinople, Constantinia, and finally, Istanbul. Each name marks a different empire's claim, layers of history embedded in syllables. The Turkish post office accelerated the change by refusing to deliver mail addressed to Constantinople, forcing the world to acknowledge the new name or lose contact with the city. The Sargasso Sea exists without shores, defined not by land, but by ocean currents that create a 2 million square mile gyre in the Atlantic. 4 currents form its boundaries: the Gulf Stream, North Atlantic Current, Canary Current, and North Atlantic Equatorial Current, spinning clockwise to trap water in the ocean's only sea without land borders. Within this liquid boundary, conditions differ from the surrounding Atlantic. The water is warmer, saltier, and clearer, with distinctive blue color visible from space. Sargassum seaweed forms floating islands that support entire ecosystems, including species found nowhere else. European and American eels migrate thousands of miles to breed in the Sargasso Sea, their larvae drifting back on currents to their parents' rivers. Ships have reported seeing the seaweed so thick it resembled meadows, though stories of vessels trapped in vegetable seas are mariners' exaggerations. This sea within the sea proves that boundaries don't require land, that oceans contain their own geography. China touches 14 different countries along its land borders, equaling Russia for the most neighboring nations. This multitude of borders includes surprising neighbors like Afghanistan, where China maintains a narrow 47-mile border through the Wakhan Corridor, and Bhutan, where the border remains disputed and unmapped in places. From tropical Myanmar to frozen Mongolia, from nuclear Pakistan to hermit North Korea, China's borders encompass every type of nation and geography. The total land border stretches 13,143 miles, longer than halfway around Earth's equator. Managing these borders requires different approaches for each neighbor, from the militarized North Korean boundary to the relatively open border with Nepal. Some borders follow natural features like the Himalayas, while others cut through deserts and steppes, where the actual line exists more on maps than on land. This abundance of neighbors shapes China's foreign policy, creating a nation that must constantly balance relationships in every direction. The Bay of Fundy experiences tidal changes so extreme that 100 billion tons of water flow in and out twice daily, creating 56-foot differences between high and low tide. This Atlantic Bay between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick becomes a different place every 6 hours. Boats that float in harbors at high tide sit on mud flats at low tide, their hulls exposed like beached whales. People walk on ocean floors that will be under 50 feet of water in 6 hours. The incoming tide advances as a visible wall of water called a tidal bore, reversing river flows and creating upstream rapids. These tides generate more energy than most rivers, inspiring tidal power plants that harness the moon's pull for electricity. The seafloor ecosystem has adapted to this extreme environment, with creatures that can survive both underwater and exposed to air. The Fundy tides are earth-breathing, inhaling and exhaling water on a schedule determined by celestial mechanics. Damascus has been continuously inhabited for 11,000 years, making it humanity's longest occupied city, older than agriculture in most places, older than written history. People lived in Damascus before the pyramids were imagined, before Stonehenge, before any city we consider ancient. The city has survived conquests by Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Mongols, Ottomans, and French, each leaving layers but never emptying the city. Streets in Damascus follow routes established before the invention of the wheel. Houses stand on foundations laid when humans were just learning to domesticate plants. The continuity seems impossible, yet archaeological evidence shows unbroken habitation since 9000 BCE. Damascus has been besieged 15 times, conquered repeatedly, damaged by earthquakes and fires, yet never abandoned. This persistence across 11 millennia makes other ancient cities seem young. When Rome was founded, Damascus was already older than Rome is now. The city represents human persistence made physical, proof that some places endure beyond all reasonable expectation. The Maldives rises only 17 feet above sea level at its highest natural point, making it Earth's flattest country, a nation that barely emerges from the ocean. No point in the entire country reaches the height of a 2-story building. The 1,192 coral islands that comprise the Maldives exist in a precarious balance with the sea, protected by coral reefs that absorb wave energy. Without these living barriers, the islands would wash away in a single storm season. The government has held underwater cabinet meetings to highlight their vulnerability to rising seas. They've created artificial islands that rise higher than natural ones and investigated purchasing land in other countries for eventual evacuation. Living in the Maldives means accepting that your nation might disappear within this century, that your grandchildren might be refugees from a country that no longer exists. This ultimate lowland nation proves that countries don't require mountains or even hills, just the temporary permission of the ocean. Turkey technically touches 3 continents through its complex geography and historical territories. While physically spanning Europe and Asia at the Bosphorus, Turkey maintains a small foothold in Africa through its control of several contested areas and its proximity to Egyptian territory at the convergence point. This tricontinental claim remains debated by geographers, but Turkey's position at the junction of 3 continents is undeniable. The country controls the only water passage between the Black Sea and Mediterranean, making it the gatekeeper between Europe and Asia. Turkish territory has served as the bridge between civilizations for millennia, a position that shaped world history. Empires have fought for control of this geographic pivot point where continents converge. Modern Turkey inherited this strategic position from the Ottomans, who explicitly ruled territory on 3 continents. Whether technically tricontinental or not, Turkey occupies geography that connects worlds. Lake Vostok lies sealed beneath 2.5 miles of Antarctic ice, liquid for 15 million years in permanent darkness. This subglacial lake, the size of Lake Ontario, exists in conditions that shouldn't support liquid water. Temperatures below freezing, pressure 350 times atmospheric normal, and no contact with Earth's surface since before humans evolved. The water remains liquid due to pressure from the ice above and possible geothermal heat from below. Russian scientists drilled through the ice to reach it in 2012, finding water that had been isolated since Antarctica froze. This water might contain organisms that evolved independently for millions of years, potentially unlike any life elsewhere on Earth. Lake Vostok is one of 400 known subglacial lakes in Antarctica, an entire hidden drainage system beneath the ice. These lakes prove that water finds ways to exist in impossible places, that life might persist in conditions we consider sterile. Brazil's easternmost point at Cabo Branco sits closer to Africa than to Brazil's own western border, only 1,800 miles from Senegal, but 2,700 miles from Brazil's frontier with Peru. This eastward bulge of South America reaches toward Africa like a memory of when the continents were joined. Ships sailing from Brazil's eastern ports reach Africa faster than they reach Brazil's western states. This proximity explains cultural connections between Brazil and West Africa that seem surprising given the ocean between them. The Portuguese slave trade exploited this closeness, creating tragic efficiency in human trafficking. Today, dust from the Sahara regularly reaches Brazil's east coast, fertilizing the Amazon rainforest with African minerals. Brazil's eastern projection makes South America much wider than North America at equivalent latitudes, creating a continental geometry that defies expectations. The Atlantic Ocean is narrower here than the width of Brazil itself. The Indian Ocean's 90 East Ridge runs perfectly north-south for 3,100 miles, Earth's longest straight geological feature. This underwater mountain range maintains its meridional precision from the Bay of Bengal to the Antarctic, following exactly 90 degrees east longitude, with accuracy that seems designed rather than natural. The ridge rises 10,000 feet from the ocean floor, but remains entirely submerged, its peaks still a mile below the surface. It formed as the Indian Plate moved north over a volcanic hotspot, leaving a trail like a seam in the ocean floor. The ridge's perfect alignment provides evidence for plate tectonics, showing the exact path India traveled on its journey from Antarctica to its collision with Asia. No other ocean feature maintains such geometric precision over such distance. The 90 East Ridge is Earth drawing a line in the ocean, a longitude made physical. Scandinavia continues rising from the weight of Ice Age glaciers that melted 10,000 years ago, with Stockholm gaining 5 millimeters of elevation annually. This post-glacial rebound lifts the land like a mattress slowly recovering from the impression of a sleeper who has risen. The ice was 2 miles thick, heavy enough to depress Earth's crust hundreds of feet. Now freed from this burden, Scandinavia rises while the sea appears to retreat. Harbors that served Vikings now sit inland, their waters withdrawn by the rising land. In the Gulf of Bothnia, new islands emerge as underwater peaks break the surface. Finland gains 2.5 square miles of land annually, not through conquest, but through geology. This rebound will continue for thousands more years until equilibrium is reached. GPS stations measure the rise precisely, watching Earth's surface recover from wounds inflicted by ice. Scandinavia's rise proves that continents float on deeper layers, that solid rock behaves like thick liquid given enough time. The Korean DMZ has transformed into an inadvertent nature preserve, 160 miles of untouched habitat, where species extinct elsewhere in Korea thrive. This 4-kilometer-wide strip between North and South Korea, created for war, has become a sanctuary for peace-loving creatures. No humans enter except rare patrols, no development occurs, no hunting disturbs the wildlife. Siberian tigers, thought extinct in Korea, have been photographed here. Red-crowned cranes, Asia's symbol of longevity, nest in the minefields. Bears, leopards, and hundreds of bird species live in this accidental Eden between two armies. The DMZ proves that nature recovers quickly when humans disappear. that even the most militarized border can become a wildlife refuge. This thin strip contains more biodiversity than either country's national parks. When Korea eventually reunifies, decisions must be made about this accident of preservation, whether to maintain the wilderness that war created or develop the land that peace would open. Earth bulges at its equator by 42 miles compared to its polar circumference, our planet measurably wider than it is tall due to its constant rotation. This isn't visible to the eye, but profoundly affects geography. The bulge means that Ecuador's Mount Chimborazo, not Everest, reaches furthest into space. It means that objects weigh slightly less at the equator than at the poles. The rotation that creates this bulge is slowing, gradually making Earth more spherical over millions of years. This equatorial bulge affects ocean currents, wind patterns, and even time, as clocks run slightly slower at the equator due to relativistic effects of the faster rotational speed. Earth isn't a sphere, but an oblate spheroid, a shape that reflects its dynamic nature. We live on a planet that spins fast enough to deform itself, creating a world that is literally shaped by its own motion through space. And so we've traveled together through a world that exists differently than we imagined, where cities sit in unexpected latitudes, where ancient seas have vanished and new ones are being born, where compass directions defy our assumptions. We've discovered that Reno sits west of Los Angeles, that Europe's great capitals rest further north than Canadian cities frozen in winter, that rivers once flowed backward and continents continue their patient drift across the planet's surface. These corrections to our mental maps aren't failures of knowledge, but invitations to wonder. Each misplaced city, each impossible border, each surprising measurement reveals how we've constructed an imaginary Earth in our minds, a simplified planet that fits our assumptions but misses the beautiful complexity of the real world. The Earth we thought we knew transforms into something more intricate, more surprising, more beautifully precise than our assumptions ever allowed. Geography, we've learned tonight, is not the static memorization of unchanging facts, but the dynamic story of a planet in constant motion, growing here, shrinking there, splitting apart and coming together over scales of time that humble our brief presence. Mountains rise and fall like slow breathing. Seas appear and disappear like seasonal lakes. Cities drift with their continents, carried on plates of rock floating on deeper currents we never see. Even the magnetic pole wanders, restless, refusing to stay where we expect it. Perhaps tomorrow you'll look at a map differently, seeing not fixed certainties, but gentle suggestions of a world more fluid than we suppose. Perhaps you'll remember that Venice shares its latitude with Ottawa, that the Sahara knows snow, that lakes exist beneath miles of Antarctic ice, holding water older than our species. These facts settle into consciousness like sediment, building layers of understanding that reshape how we perceive the space we inhabit. The planet continues its ancient rotations beneath us as we drift towards sleep, bulging at its equator, carrying us through space at speeds we cannot feel. Somewhere, the Nile flows north because north is downhill. Somewhere, Iceland grows 2 inches wider. Somewhere, the Colorado River dies in the desert, never reaching the sea it seeks. Thank you for drifting with me through these quiet corrections, these geographical revelations that remind us the world is never quite what we assume. May your dreams tonight carry you to places that surprise you with their actual locations, to cities further north than you imagined, to seas that once were deserts, to mountains that remember being ocean floors. Until we meet again beneath another constellation of facts, until another night when we explore what we thought we knew. Sleep well, and let the world continue its slow transformations while you rest.